Becoming who you really are, the untamed philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. What if your entire worldview collapsed, and instead of giving up, you built a new one from scratch? That's what Friedrich Nietzsche did, not just for himself, but for all of Western philosophy. He was one of those rare minds who saw the cracks forming in the foundation of society and decided not to patch them, but to rebuild everything on a new, radical idea that we must create meaning, not find it. Nietzsche lived at a time when religion, particularly Christianity, was beginning to lose its grip on European culture. The certainty it once offered was crumbling, but without it, people weren't liberated. They were lost. The fear Nietzsche had was not just that people would stop believing in God, but that, in doing so, they would lose their values, their sense of purpose, and fall into despair. Rather than follow the crowd into nihilism, the belief that life is meaningless, Nietzsche chose a third path, a harder path, one that said, there is no inherent meaning in life. And that's exactly why we must create our own. A childhood marked by death and doubt. Nietzsche was born in 1844 in a deeply religious household. His father was a Lutheran pastor, but tragedy struck early. When Nietzsche was 5, his father died from a painful brain disease. A year later, his younger brother also passed away. Imagine a child being told that God is good while watching innocent people suffer senselessly. These experiences didn't just shape Nietzsche, they cracked open his faith. He eventually abandoned Christianity and turned to philosophy, but not just any philosophy. Nietzsche didn't want to find universal truths, he wanted to challenge them. He began to ask, what if everything we believed in, morality, truth, even God, was just a story we tell ourselves? The death of God and the birth of the Overman. When Nietzsche famously wrote, God is dead, he wasn't celebrating. He was warning us. Without God, the systems built on religion, our morality, our values, would collapse. And unless we replace them with something stronger, we would spiral into hopelessness. So what was Nietzsche's solution? He introduced the idea of the Übermensch, or Overman, not a superhero, but an ideal. Someone who rises above the herd, rejects imposed values, and dares to define life on their own terms. This isn't a person you become once, it's someone you are always becoming. Think of the Übermensch as the best version of yourself, but not the comfortable, positive affirmation kind. This version demands sacrifice, self-discipline, confrontation with pain and fear. It requires that you destroy parts of yourself constantly to evolve. In Nietzsche's words, you must become who you are. Story break. The Boxer and the Übermensch take. The story of a former street fighter who became a world-class boxer. As a teenager, he lived in chaos, violence, poverty, addiction. Society told him he was doomed. But one day, he decided to become something more. He started training obsessively, not just physically, but mentally. Every time he got knocked out, he studied why. Every time he lost a match, he dissected the cause. Over years, he rebuilt himself into someone unrecognizable from the boy on the streets. He didn't do this for fame. He did it because he refused to let his past define him. That's Nietzsche's Übermensch in real life. Someone who carves meaning from suffering, who doesn't just survive pain, but uses it as fuel. The will to power and self-overcoming, one of Nietzsche's boldest ideas, is that life isn't governed by truth or morality, but by a will to power. This isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. It's the desire to grow, to transcend limitations, to keep becoming. And that process of continuous growth is what he called self-overcoming. You never arrive. You evolve constantly. You outgrow old ideas, habits, beliefs, even versions of yourself. Suffering is part of this cycle. In fact, Nietzsche argued that suffering gives life its depth and value. As he put it, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. The breakdown and the legacy. Tragically, Nietzsche's own life didn't end triumphantly. In his final years, he became mentally unstable. One day, he saw a horse being whipped in the street and threw himself onto it, sobbing, "I understand you." It was the last lucid act of a man who spent his life preaching strength and self-overcoming. Some call it a contradiction. Others call it the ultimate expression of empathy from a man who had wrestled with life's deepest pain. He died in 1900, unknown, unloved, and considered a failure by most. His books barely sold. He had no following. But after his death, his work exploded across the world, influencing thinkers, artists, writers, even revolutions. So, what can we learn? Nietzsche didn't give us a map. He gave us a mirror. He didn't want us to follow him. He wanted us to find our own path. If there's a single takeaway from Nietzsche's philosophy, it's this: you are not a fixed identity. You are a process, a becoming. Don't chase comfort. Don't worship safety. Don't live by borrowed beliefs. Create your values. Transform your pain. Become your own reason to exist, even if the world doesn't understand you, even if it breaks you. Because in the end, that's what greatness is: to rise, not despite suffering, but through it. Follow for more Stoic mindset and self-growth lessons every day.